Well, good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. We are super excited to be having this opportunity to come together. My name is Tommy Cummins, and I'm the lead student pastor here at Plum Creek Church, which means that I get the amazing privilege and honor of working with our 6th through 12th grade students, which keeps me either young or stupid or a little bit of both, but I love it. It's a lot of fun, that's for sure. I've actually been working myself with junior high and high school students for about 17 years now, really essentially since I was one myself. And it's been interesting over the years to just see some of the trends that have come, some of them that have gone. Hoping TikTok is maybe one of those that's on the way out at some point, but it's not looking good, people, okay? But certainly one of the trends that we've seen over the last few years is that mental health continues to become more and more of an issue that students are struggling with at a younger and younger age, which is why we are gathered here today, for sure. Certainly, we have seen plenty of instances where we kind of have to jump into action and figure out what are we doing, how are we going to respond to this, and in that process have realized, hey, we should also be doing whatever we can on the preventative end of things and helping to have these conversations earlier so that we can be more proactive rather than reactive. So thank you so much for doing exactly that today, for choosing to be proactive. I'm assuming that every single person is in here either because you have students of your own, you work with students, you are have a student down the street that you care for deeply, whatever that might look like. So thank you for taking the time out to be here. Here at Plum Creek, we are blessed that all of our student staff, including myself, are youth mental health first aid certified. And what that means is that youth mental health first aid certification is to mental health what CPR is to the body. So I'm certainly not the mental health care provider. We will have some of them with us here today that'll be able to share their expertise. But it does mean that we have been trained and know what to do in moments of crisis and to know how to respond in those tough situations. And I look back at these last few years since we have been youth mental health first aid certified and think, my goodness, I wish that I knew this information a long time ago. I wish that I knew immediately how to respond when a student lets us know that they're harming themselves or are dealing with suicidal ideation or whatever it might be. And so I, again, applaud you for taking those steps to say, yeah, what can we do to make sure that in those moments that we are ready and we have some tools as someone who has influence in the lives of students to know how to react in that. In the state of Colorado, death by suicide is now the leading cause of death amongst our young students. And obviously that is a severe tragedy for sure. And so we have some incredible people here today that are going to help speak to some of these trends and what we can do to, again, not only know how to respond in those moments, but also how to be proactive with some things like some preventative factors and making sure that we are setting our students up well for success. We want to make sure that you're aware up front that there's not going to be any intermission at any point. And so please, if at any point you need to use the restroom or want to go grab some more coffee or whatever it might be, you're welcome to step on out. We want to be honoring of your time, but we also want to have this be a time where we can just take a look at some difficult conversations along the way, for sure. After the workshop is over, our panelists, who are going to come up here in just a moment, will be out in the atrium where you just came in and checked in, and they would love nothing more than to connect with you, to provide some more resources as they are able, and just to have an opportunity to shake a hand or bump an elbow, whichever you prefer at this given time. And so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and invite our panelists to come up. And as our panelists come up, I'm just going to very quickly introduce them, and then they will have an opportunity here in just a little bit to introduce themselves a little bit more and to give a little bit more background as to who they are, what is their area of expertise, so on and so forth. So starting right down here on the far end, this is Doyle Lott from Envision Counseling. And then to his right, your left, we've got Catherine Schultz, right? Yep, sorry, I almost mispronounced your last name. And she is also from Envision Counseling. Then we have Sienna Adams, who's from an organization in Colorado Springs called Education for a Lifetime, and then DJ Roberts, who is also from Envision Counseling. Envision is the counseling center that we here at Plum Creek partner with most often here in town. I can tell you both from secondhand and firsthand experience that they do incredible work there, and we're very, very thankful for the work that they do, that's for sure. Here at Plum Creek Church, we like to say that we are people in process, meaning that we want to adopt a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset, and that no matter where we are on our mental health journey, that there are steps to be taken to continue to move towards the healthy end of that spectrum. That is certainly true for the students in our lives, but we hope that you know that that's true for you as well on that journey. Again, I myself had a traumatic brain injury from a bicycling accident about 5 years ago now, and to just firsthand experience get to see the amazing work that is being done was incredible, that's for sure. We want to let you know that we throughout will be asking some questions of them after they introduce themselves, and thank you so much for sending those questions in, those of you who were able to. We had a lot of questions and a lot of very similar questions, and so we essentially collated that data and boiled it down to a few questions that were overlapping and showing up again over and over. But if you didn't get an opportunity to ask a question, or if they start to talk and you're like, my goodness, that was awesome, but also I have a follow-up question to that, at any point today, you'll see the number up on the screen. You can text that in. That's an anonymous line where you can text in a question, and we will do our best to kind of sift through those as we go. We can't promise that we will get to every question and be able to answer every specific situation either, but please, we would love to continue to interact together throughout that. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Doyle Lott. Doyle, tell us a little bit about Envision and what you guys are doing there.
Thank you so much, Tommy. It is such a privilege to be here, and on behalf of DJ, Catherine, and myself, to sit in front of you, I just kind of want to look at you for just a minute. Is it awkward? I'm looking at you because I want to take you in. We're all kind of fellow strugglers, starting with me, trying to figure out how to make all this work. And then when it comes to being a parent with children, we really want to do the best job that we can. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we could do better. And so Envision Counseling Clinic is located, we're based here in Castle Rock. We do have other offices in Dillon, Colorado, Monument, and we've just opened a new office in Park Meadows. Dr. Veronica Johnson and her husband Steve is the owner of Envision Counseling Clinic. Steve kind of takes care of the business, and Veronica is the psychologist. And so we have the privilege of working underneath them and having to work at a faith-based Christian organization where we have the opportunity to not just share the principles that we learned in school, but also to be able to share the principles from the Word of God. And so that's an honor for us. For me, I've been doing this work since 1976. I love this work. I began serving, much like Tommy did, as a youth pastor in a church in Ohio. From there, I worked at Child Protective Services. Then I went into foster care. Then I worked at a hospital, mental health facility on the adolescent unit. And that's when I found out how much I love doing family counseling. And now I'm doing individual outpatient therapy. My mantra when it comes to therapy is that the healing comes in the telling. When things are on the inside, it's in the dark and it grows and becomes overwhelming. If we can just talk about it, it comes into the light and starts losing some of its power, and then we're able to look at it from different perspectives. Getting it from here out can sometimes be difficult. I've equated it to the times that I felt nauseous. I'm going to throw up. Yuck. I don't want to. I'm going to throw up. And eventually I do. And almost always I feel better. There's a mess to clean up, but I feel better. And that's exactly how therapy is. When you're dealing with, I don't know if I can talk about this. This is something that I've carried. And now we as parents, having the opportunity to try and figure out how we counsel our children and help them to get it to come out. And so having that privilege and challenge is pretty important that we be prepared. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that this workshop was put together. Helping somebody feel comfortable. Because if I equate therapy, the therapist, to a comfortable pair of shoes. If those shoes are comfortable, you can probably go anywhere in them. If the shoes aren't comfortable, you're not going to go very far. The same thing with the therapist. If you're comfortable, you can probably talk about anything. If you're not comfortable, you probably won't come back. It's our hope that we can help you as you're here today to say, as a parent, you know, and by the way, you don't need any of us up here. If you want to know who the best parents are, it's those parents that don't have children. Do you remember that stage in your life when you didn't have children and you thought, I got it all together? And then they came. And when they arrived, it was one of those times of trying to learn, what's next? How do I do this? And so there's developmental stages, the newborns and the infants and the toddlers and the preschoolers and the elementary and then the latency and then the adolescents. And so when we get to the adolescent, that has always been, you remember when you were an adolescent, one of the most difficult developmental stages to get through. And I believe this is true, that of all the generations before us, this generation of adolescents is the most difficult developmental stage to go through. You know what else is true? The parents of those adolescents, you have the most difficult job of any parent before you. So as you're here today, loving your kid, knowing you want to be the best parent, we're going to fumble through this together and be able to find some strengths and some answers together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Catherine.
I'm Catherine Schultz, and segueing off of what Doyle said, I also have the heart for adolescents. I am a therapist at Envision. I specialize in adolescents. I'm also a school counselor in Douglas County School District, so I am with middle schoolers a lot this age. So I am blessed to be able to do both. I never get burnt out because I've always got a foot over here or a foot over here. And I have such a heart for this community. Specifically, my heart that I have is for suicide prevention in Douglas County. I was raised in Douglas County. I went to Delia Elementary. And I'm loving on these kids every day. I agree with Doyle. I think this, after COVID, has been extremely difficult for our kids to get back into school. I'm seeing things in the school where there's so many panic attacks, lots of talk about suicide. It's like an epidemic. We're having a difficult time. So I also specialize in anxiety and helping people, not just kids, I see adults as well, get through that. Look at the root of the anxiety. Where is that coming from? I apply that at school and at the office as well. The other side of the coin of anxiety is depression. They're cousins, and I feel like anxiety usually comes first, and then there's isolation, and then comes on the depression. And I kind of think that's where this post-COVID stuff is. There's been so much isolation. God designed us to need each other and be together. And as far as raising our kids, we can't do it alone. You need partners with other parents. You need to be involved in groups where you're praying for your kids. My kids are both in college and grad school now, but I was involved in Moms in Prayer, and that was a great organization. It's also known as Moms in Touch International, but we would get together every week, about 8 moms at one of our homes, and we'd pray for our kids, we'd pray for the school, and whether your kids are going to private school, homeschool, public school, you still need prayer partners to get through this. You need mentors, somebody that's a little further above you to get through times. And you need to partner with professionals. whether that's a teacher, counselor, a private therapist, a youth pastor. I know that my son is 19, and his youth pastors have been his greatest mentors, and he still sees them, goes to coffee with them. But it's not just mom and dad. It's got to be your support system to raise these kids. And on that note, they also need support. Groups, whether you're doing youth group or some other group, they need to be involved in groups, especially post-isolation. They need to be around other people that feel like they do, that can be validated, and also be empowered by whoever's leading the group to say, we can get through this. Somehow, some way, and like Dowie was saying, it might be messy, but we're gonna get through this. So it is a really hard time. And it breaks my heart that the rate of suicide is now the number one taker of our children, because I've always had my eye on that. It was always accidents first. And I do a lot of research on suicide to kind of stay ahead of what I need to know. I know a lot of us think Douglas County has the highest rate, but we're not, just so you know. There's the mountains and definitely El Paso County. Pueblo is the highest region. But we don't want to rise to the top. We need to hang in there. We need to be talking about mental health. Because once we're talking about it, I know sometimes we think, oh, we don't want to talk about cutting, self-harming, or suicide. It might give them a thought, but that's exactly opposite. We need to be discussing it so that we can, like Doyle was saying, get those feelings out and say, I'm feeling this way. And somebody said, I'm glad you told me. Let's do something about that. Social media, I want to talk about that. I really think that social media has destroyed our children. Out in the lobby, I have a cell phone contract. If it's not too late for your kids, I'd get one of these things signed so you know limitations. I believe that the cell phone device is owned by the parent. They should look at it. So I'll come back to that later, but thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. So Sienna is going to bring an incredible perspective today because, again, she works for an organization in Colorado Springs called Education for a Lifetime, and one of the amazing things of many that they do is has the opportunity to go into local schools with a suicide prevention curriculum that they teach. And also, Sienna has been working with her own peers for the last several years, was in Colorado Springs through a cluster of suicides, death by suicides that had happened there. And so, Sienna, tell us a little bit about yourself, Education for a Lifetime, and what you've seen.
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Sienna Adams. Some of you may notice that I kind of look like your students. I'm 19. I graduated in 2020 from high school. And as I started high school, I ended up being in a suicide cluster. I was surviving through that at my school. In our little community, we had 10 in 2 weeks, and 4 of those were at my school. And so it was chaos is probably the best way I can explain that. And from that point on, it was my goal of what can I do? My school didn't really know how to handle it. Nobody does. And so we started programs, we started, student outreach, we had teachers learning things, everybody was trying what they could, and I ended up in a program, was able to, prevail through that, I guess, learn as much as I can in high school, and I ended up meeting my boss now, and in November of 2020, he was like, hey, I have a job for you. And so in January, I started going into schools and teaching about mental health, teaching about setting boundaries, teaching about being able to talk to their parents and those kinds of things. And I go in there because I'm 19. It's easier for them to understand that I get what they're going through because we have the biggest generational gap between you guys and us because we have these. This changes everything, right? It's a completely different world than what you guys grew up in. And I get to start out conversations and I'm like, why don't you talk to your parents? And I get conversations of well, it's never been brought up to me, or they're scared of how you guys are going to react, or they are worried that they're going to get you too scared about them. Those are the most common. They're worried about your reaction. They're worried about putting a burden on you. and they don't know how you feel about it because it's not openly talked about. And so I just really want to thank you guys for being here, because this is a first step. You don't know how to talk about it either. Nobody does. There's not a sound science. So learning what you can and being able to bring up these things to your students, I think, is incredibly important. So what we do here out in El Paso County, we are a program that goes into schools. We have 2 programs. We have a relationship program that talks about setting boundaries, consent, those kinds of things. And then we also have our suicide prevention. And that's a 1-day program. We are automatically connected with these students. We have youth pastors that go into schools. I'm one of the ones on staff. And then at the end of the day, at the end of this class, we make it really simple. We're like, you're telling us that your parents don't reach out, that your teachers don't reach out, and that's why I'm here. They're reaching out because they want somebody to reach out, and we end the class with a 1, 2, 3 system. It's really simple. A 1 is like, hey, thanks for coming to class. A 2 is like, hey, I might need to talk to somebody at some point. And a 3 is, I need to talk to somebody today. And I was actually at a school Wednesday and Thursday this week, and I only spoke to 4 classes, and I want to say like 8 to 10 2s and about 5 3s. That's that like immediate help. They're like, I need to talk to somebody today because I don't know what's going on. It's working. Your students want to talk about this. And I think that's the biggest thing parents don't realize, is that they're like, well, my student would bring it up if they wanted to talk about it, but they don't know how either. So thank you guys for being here. And I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah. DJ.
Wow, how impressive is Sienna? I mean, I met her this morning, and I was like trying to get it together because I know I'm next, but I'm like about to cry, and I'm like, her story is so powerful, and it's just an amazing thing to have boots on the ground down south. It's really, really cool. And so, I'm DJ. I'm a trained psychologist. I've been practicing for about 3 years now. I've been in the schools. I've been a consultant for the schools. And I've published research on school mental health. So I very much feel called to this work. And it's wonderful. As Catherine said, it's like when you're doing something you love, you don't feel burnt out. And so I've been blessed to be able to do that. My wife and I, we have 2 kids. So I have a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. So God bless coffee, It's a wonderful thing. But yeah, I think... So in the last year and a half, depression and anxiety symptoms have increased 31% since COVID. And so, we can speak to what we're seeing in the schools very much, and you guys can talk about that at home, I'm sure, as well. But we're in the middle of something right now, and there's very much a need to be preventative and to do something in the moment as well. So, raise your hand. How many would you say anxiety is a bad thing? I get that all the time when I'm doing therapy with the kids. I say, do you think anxiety is a bad thing? And they always say, yeah, it's terrible. And that's not true. Anxiety is not a bad thing. It can be. And so I like to use the metaphor like, you're driving a car. If you have too little anxiety, it's like, who cares about stoplights? Who cares about it's red, I'll make it through, it's okay. You're going to crash, right? That's not good. You don't want to have too little anxiety, but you don't want to be on the other side of the spectrum either. You don't want to have too much where you're like, you never leave your parking space or, that's not healthy either. So you want to be somewhere in the middle, right? You want to have a healthy balance of that. And so I think as parents, and also what we try to do, is we try and help our students find those barricades on each side and gently guide them along the way. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And there's 2 things that I want to share with you that I think we can do to troubleshoot right now with our kids. And I think one is awareness. We need to help our kids be aware of what is normal in general, not social media, as Catherine said. What is normal in general right now, right? Help them understand that. They may have friends that take vacations every week. That's not normal. We can't expect that. And so that's the first thing. And also being aware of who they are individually on an individualistic basis. And by having them understand that, they can be able to identify these things and come talk to you, right? So for example, me, if I go to a youth event with Tommy, and I'm not jumping in, playing cornhole, playing basketball, having fun, I need to recognize that in myself and say, wait, normally this is fun for me, I'm not doing it. Maybe I need to do something. Maybe I need to talk to somebody about it. I need to recognize that. And it's important that I say it's individualistic because that may be different for other kids. Other kids, maybe they just want to hang back and not join in on all that stuff. And that's totally fine. But they need to know where they fall. They need to know where they are on that spectrum so they can identify it, right? The second thing is access. So once we're aware of what's normal in general and aware of what's normal in ourselves, then we need to be able to have the access to come talk to Doyle, come talk to Tommy. Maybe it's music that we need to, that's our escape, that we can really regulate ourselves. Maybe it's taking a walk, whatever it is, that's very important as well. So that's the second thing, and that's something that I hope that you guys can take home today and be able to immediately start implementing and helping your children understand the difference of where they fall and what you can do if you're off that.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Again, we had several questions that came in, so we are going to just start to dive into some of the most common questions asking of our panel here. Once again, we have more questions that are coming in. Thank you so much. Please feel free to shoot those questions our way as we go. But Doyle, to start out with, our first one, what are some tactics when communicating with my child that can be used for resolving an issue or disagreement without escalating it further, especially for a child who struggles with anger issues or ODD?
ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. So when it comes to communicating with your child, we're all fellow strugglers once again. I think it's so important that starts from the very beginning stages of communication and working through those developmental stages. If you were to go to the library or you were to Google a type of parenting style called love and logic, you would find a lot from toddlers all the way up through the different developmental stages to how we parent them. And I found that to be very helpful. The thing that I learned is in that early stages, we are allowed to say to our children, do as I say, not as I do. But when they get to adolescent age, then they start doing as they see. So when they're coming to you and they have their adolescent attitude with the rolling eyes and the our role is not to drop to their level. Our role is to maintain our attitude of communication that I love you, I care for you, and I love you too much to let you get away with this. And so I don't know how many of you have children 12 and under? Welcome. You are that 12 and under stage we often refer to as the latency stage, because that's the stage where it's kind of like the calm before the storm. And so it's important that we are pouring into our kids during that latency stage, because we're preparing for the trouble in River City that's about to arrive when they turn 13, 14, and on. And so pouring into them and looking for opportunities to let them know I am your parent and I love you, and there will be times that you will disagree with me, but I don't stay up late at night trying to figure out how to make your life miserable. My role is to help you get across this adolescent bridge. And if they're latency age, approaching it, that you are having a communication and building that rapport, because when the storms start coming and they start showing their independence, that we're helping them get across that adolescent bridge. That bridge takes them from childhood to adulthood. And that is always, and we talked, it's the most difficult stage to get through. It has a slippery slope. And so to be able to say to these kids, I know sometimes you feel more like an adult than what you do a child, But there's a lot of responsibility on that side of the bridge, and then you don't like it, and then you come back to the childish side of the bridge where you are tantruming, making poor choices. And so understanding as a parent how the adolescent bridge works, and knowing that you would love to put them in a sanitary bubble to get them across that bridge. But you can't, and if you could, they wouldn't like it. The opportunity to experience what they need to experience to become the adults that they need to launch into. When they're coming to you and they have requests, that was a nice way of putting, they have demands. And you're saying, this is how we work in this house. These are the rules of the house. I love what Catherine has brought today regarding the cell phone contract. Make sure you get a copy of that on your way out, because you as the parent have the responsibility to know what's going on in that cell phone. You have a responsibility to know what's going on in their social media. And so to be able, when someone is coming at you, when your child is coming at you with that attitude, sometimes we need to take a break. I would love to answer that question, but let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to put a bookmark in it. When we come back, let's talk about this, where you're not raising to their level and they're taking it higher and you're taking it higher, because sometimes I think it would be interesting to, if we had a video camera as to what goes on in people's homes and then how they present in church. Sometimes it can be two different worlds, and your kids know that. Your kids know that. Why do you act this way in front of people, but you're different with me? They do what they see. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to share anything on that one?
Well, I really think modeling is very important. It's more important than explaining what you should do. They're going to watch you. They know you. My kids know me. I remember one time, I don't know, they were like 7 and 10. They said, "Mom, we always know when you're mad." I'm like, "Really? How? You always chew your nails." I'm like, "I do?" Chew or file, I can't remember which one. And then one day I picked up the nail file and I was like, they're right. They know me better than I know myself. So they're always watching. So.
Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing real quick. Cell phone contract, grab it. Have your kids do a 30-day social media fast. Do it with them if you're on social media. Just reset the baseline. Get them out of it. And I can't tell you how many problems and issues have been resolved just by doing that.
That's good. DJ, how can I determine the difference between what might be normal preteen or teen angst and something more serious? And at what point should I seek professional help for my child?
I don't know how I landed this question. Adolescence, I like to say adolescence in itself is a mental disorder. Like, it's their frontal lobe isn't fully developed, like that thing that makes them think before they act or think critically is literally not developed yet. So take it easy on yourself, parents. There's a lot of things that you just can't control that are gonna happen. And so I like to share this story. I think it's a great microcosm for the truth that I'm trying to share. I had this parent come to me one day. They had a 16-year-old girl who was in high school, and they said, "We know she has ADHD and anxiety and depression, the whole gamut." And I was like, "Okay, why do you say that?" And they said, "Well, she went to school one day, and she went into school and left her car on the whole day. Just left her car running all day. Like, she has to have ADHD." I'm like, "Okay, that's concerning. Let's talk about it." And so I talked with the parents, and then I talked individually with the young girl, and I said, "Take me through what was going on in your brain when you got to school and you just left your car on all day." And she said, "Oh, wow." I said, "What were you thinking? Were you overwhelmed? Were there too many things going on in your head? Are you having problems being organized?" And she was like, No, I got to school, and I saw my friends. They were like ahead of me, and I can't be seen walking into school by myself. So I ran up and caught up with them, and I just forgot my car was on." I'm like, "Oh, so that's the issue, right?" We need to see everything through the lens of an adolescent, right? The parents left a car on all day, immediately jumped to a disorder, right? they're adolescents, right? They're going to do stupid stuff. Leaving your car on all day is pretty dumb. And she was doing it because she wanted, she didn't want people to see her walking into school by herself. Now, to us, we're thinking that's kind of silly, but that's a huge thing for teenagers, especially in high school. And so the first thing I would say is see everything through that same lens. Try and see that first before you jump to conclusions. And then I like lists, so I'm just going to jump into another list. I think, as psychologists, this is what we do when we are kind of looking at behavior and trying to determine whether it's clinically significant or whatever, is the first thing is frequency, right? So how many of you have had your son or daughter come home and they've been crying because something that happened at school? Most people probably, yeah, for sure. And so that in and itself that's pretty normal, right? I mean, that's going to happen. That's not something we would say, come see us about. But frequency, did they come home one time and they were crying because of what happened at school, or have they been doing this for 4 weeks, right? Has it been 4 weeks straight that they've come home crying about peers or something at school? That's when you've got an issue, right? The other one is intensity, right? So we have frequency and then intensity. If they come home and they're crying because something happened at school, normal. Are they coming home and destroying your house because they're upset? Throwing things, destroying their own property, making a mess of the house? Is it intense? If that's the case, then yeah, maybe that's when you come see a professional. And then the last one, I gotta look at my notes real quick. Duration. So you have frequency, intensity, and duration. So are they coming home and crying because of what happened at school for 45 minutes, and it's a rough 45 minutes, and then we kind of gather ourselves and move on? Or are they crying for 11 hours straight? Are they crying for, they get home at 3 and they're crying all day, don't eat dinner, don't sleep, they're up 2 a.m., you're laying in bed with them, right? That's a little concerning as from where we see that, right? And so keep in mind those 3 things. You can be able to measure this stuff on your own, because those are the questions that we're going to ask you if you come see us, right? So you can do some troubleshooting on your own with your children and see, okay, is it past the duration test? Is this really high in frequency? And is this really, really intense behavior? And, if it kind of checks one of those boxes, then I would say err on the side of caution and get some professional help.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Catherine, this one says, my 2nd grade daughter is already comparing her body to others. With the pressure of growing up in a social media-driven world, how can I teach my child that they are enough and help boost their self-confidence when it comes to their body image?
Pretty typical question, and it is really happening. I'd even say as young as kindergarten already. So I want to first go to the modeling model. What are you doing at home, making sure that you're not comparing yourself to other ladies or, talking a lot about body image in an unhealthy way. So that's number one, is you've got to look at your own modeling, what's going on in your home. Sometimes there's teenage siblings. So if you have teen siblings, you may need to talk to them. Like, be careful what you say, speak body positivity in front of your younger kids. And then, of course, there's the huge elephant in the room is the social media. I would hope that 2nd graders aren't on social media when they are home. So we really have to watch that. I think the times that maybe they're on social media is when they're at a friend's and, maybe they're not. Kids get together and like to, sneak off and look at things like that. So maybe just make sure that they're not looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. And then I would have a conversation with that 2nd grader saying, you've got some good stuff going on that other people don't. Like, look at your amazing eyes. Point out the things that are beautiful and unique about them and how God gave them amazing traits. I have this conversation with adolescents a lot. So I'm like, well, tell me what you do like about yourself. And they might say something like, I like my eyebrows, I like my hair. It's like, that's what we have to focus on, is the positive things. We are all created differently. If we focus on the negative things, it's our thoughts that turn into emotions. So if we're focused on like, I don't like my feet, I don't like my back or whatever, then they're gonna feel bad. But if they're focused on what they do like, I love my hair, I can't wait to do something cute with it today, then they're gonna feel good about themselves. So I would just point out their unique things that they like about themselves. Not so much what you like about them, but what they like. And then you can have them, praise God for those things, and really focus on that. Let's see. Yeah, there are a lot of pressures. I think the more that they can see that they can compliment other people, like it's not all about them. It's like if they know that other people struggle too, and it's good to give a compliment every now and then. It's like, I noticed your eyes, or I noticed that shirt you wore. I think that, again, breeds positivity, where what comes around goes around. So we want to keep it the positive talk. And we all know that kids put others down because they feel down. So the more we can say, hey, here's what's really going on. The reason they said that about you is because they don't feel good about themselves. And we just look for the root of what is really going on with that. So again, it's second grade. Just have those conversations. And if you're going to be watching shows or being at the mall where there's, immodest clothing, you just have to have a conversation about it. Say, hey, that's one way of dress. And we have this a lot at the middle school. These crop tops are really in style. And so like the first week, we're having to talk about dress code. You can't be showing that. It's a distraction to the learning environment. So, we all have to do this job together. It's really hard when the cool stores are selling things that aren't modest and show more of the body. So it's this struggle that this adolescent group is really going through a lot.
Anybody else?
I'd like that. I turned it on too fast. I'd like to add to that, parents, make sure you're not talking about yourself when body image comes up. I can tell you that my parents really struggled with that. My mom used to be like, oh, I used to be so small in high school, and now look at me now, right? You're not supposed to look the way that you look in high school in adulthood. Your body literally goes through things. You are not supposed to look the way. And my mom talked about those things, and it really hurt her daughter's images, because it was like, as soon as you get out of high school, all of a sudden you're like, well, what if I'm this? What if I'm that? Like, my mom was lighter than me when she got married, and she made it known that I knew that, right? So don't talk about that. Maybe talk about it with your spouse if it's something you're struggling with, because you should talk about it, but not to your kids, right? The other one is intercept when other people talk about your little kid's body. If they're like, oh my gosh, you're so tiny, or like, I could fit my hand around your wrist, like those things, your kids hold on to. 100% of the time, your kid is going to remember if somebody walked up to them and they're like, oh my gosh, look how tiny your daughter is. Look how muscular your son is, because they're going to set it that is what they're supposed to be. I watch it happen. So intercept those and be like, hey, actually, we only talk about things that they can change. Be like, I really like your shirt, or I really like how your hair looks today, or the eyes is great. Be like, your eyes are beautiful, right? But those things that your kids are going to hold on to are what other people say about them.
That's good. So we've had a couple of questions into going back to the social media idea of what if we've missed the boat already and they're already on social media, then what do we do? Catherine, would you mind speaking to that one first?
Yeah, so if they already are on social media, it's what are they watching on social media? Maybe then you have that talk about okay, so you're on YouTube. The kids like to go home and watch YouTube. It's like, well, what are they watching on YouTube? Are they watching science experiments? Are they watching some, fun, some humor things? Or are they watching things that are dark or things that are promiscuous? So we need to see what they are spending their time watching. And then as parents, you hold the parent license. You get to determine how much time they spend on that. And I get it. You're not always home when they are, but you can set controls so that the Wi-Fi's on or the Wi-Fi's off, and I know they hate it, but they'll thank you later. We didn't let our daughter have Snapchat until she was 17. She's a little bit older than you, but she was so mad at us. And then later, she's almost 23, she's like, thank you for not letting me do that. I feel so much healthier. Because like you said, a lot of the body image stuff, she doesn't have some of those struggles, but a lot of her friends do. They're on Snapchat and making themselves look a certain way, or it's all about the picture. So yeah, you have that parent license, you get to decide. And they may be mad at you, but you gotta look at the long-term effects. It's not your job to please your child and make them your best friend. You have to look out for them for years to come. So that's what I'd say. If they've already dipped in social media, it's okay to say, you know what? We've had a change of plan in our family. You can do that at any time.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else?
Exactly. To echo exactly what Catherine's saying, like, you have the parent card. If they're mad at you, so what? Take it away. It's only, like I was saying, 30 days. Don't take it away indefinitely forever, because then they're probably going to lose their mind. But, just start off with 30 days. And there's a really cool book where it's like a 30-day social media fast, and it's a faith-based book too. And so have them do the 30-day fast, read the book. Guarantee you, at the very least, it's going to provide them some perspective. So let me Google it. I'll try and get that. I'll try and get that to you guys. But yeah,
It's good. Yeah.
My other one with this is model. I also talk to students and I'm like, how do you know when somebody's not listening? And they're like, well, my parents tend. I come home and they're sitting there on Facebook. And they're like, oh, how was your day? And I start to explain and they're like, have you seen this? Have you seen this? And your kids, I can't say your kids, but a lot of kids feel like their parents are constantly on Facebook. They're not paying attention. They're just reposting what other people are posting. And so as soon as you start doing that, your kids lose the respect that you have when you try to take away their social media. Because they're like, you're on your phone during movie time, you're on your phone during game time, you're texting this, you're doing that, and so why can't I, right? This is something that your kids are watching. It's exactly as like if you tell your kids not to wear their shoes in the house, but you wear your shoes in the house, they're gonna be like, why? Like, our favorite question is why. So if you're gonna fast from social media for them, like, delete it off your phone too. Do this together, because otherwise you're not practicing what you're trying to teach.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. As you mentioned that, I'm thinking about my students, and I'm like, well, have you talked to your parents about this? Or, I do hear that. I don't know, my mom's always on her phone when I get home. She's not really listening, and they get really frustrated. So I guess just have a self-check moment about that. Be present when your kids are there. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Sorry, one more thing. Try and make it clear that social media isn't the devil. There's a lot of really good and useful ways to utilize social media. There's a lot of great pages and Facebook, Instagram, whatever, that, can be uplifting, right? And so I would also have that perspective, and, when you're talking to your kids, like, I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not saying never get back on, but it's healthy to take a break, take a step back. How did I feel after those 30 days? Did it kind of feel good not to feel like I need to, I have FOMO, fear of missing out on everything, because I'm constantly scrolling, and maybe I live my life a little bit more. Yeah.
I can tell you personally, I'm 8 months into a social media fast that was going to happen for an entire year that might end up just being the rest of my life. Like, I feel healthier now than I did 8 months ago in a lot of ways, that's for sure. Doyle, I think you're going to say something.
As we talk about this here, and all of us here are coming from different perspectives. We're all coming from different homes. We're all coming from different children that have different temperaments, and you as parents have different temperaments. And I love what you've done with this panel, because you have Sienna here, who is so young, and yet she brings such a great perspective to what's going on. You have DJ here, who's a young father with a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old at home. And then you have Catherine, who has raised children through adolescence and are now graduating from college or in college. And then you have the old guy. I remember when I worked at the hospital and I was working on the adolescent unit, and this young girl was just out of control in tears, and she was just so much in despair. And I came up and said, "Hey, what can I do to help you?" And she goes, "I don't know. You're nothing just but an old white fat man." So that hurt. My kids are now 40 and 42 years old, and my wife and I are now 46 years into marriage. And so there's a lot of different perspectives represented here. And so now I have grandkids who are now 14 and soon to be 16 years old. And when my 9-year-old grandson came to us and said, "There's a friend at school that introduced me to pornography," 9 years old. And at 9 years old, he not only told him how to find pornography, but also how to erase his history. Mm. And he, at 9 years old, he was caught up in it. And there was one night he just so caught up in the shame and the sadness of it. He went to his parents and said, "I don't know what to do. I can't stop." The healing comes in the telling. I love the fact that my grandson felt like he could come to his parents and say, "This is a problem." And I'm hoping that I can be the grandparent, that we can be the people, the parents, and the young people that they feel safe to come to. Because if they fear that we're going to explode, they won't come. Hmm. If they feel like I can come and talk to you about anything, and there have been times that my eyebrows are raised. Oh, really? We're going to talk about that right now. But to be able to say, "Yes, thank you for doing that." The kids are getting in deeper than they know what to do with. And so your situation is different. The healing comes in the telling. Whether you talk in your family, or you talk to a therapist, or you do family therapy, the healing comes in the telling. Getting together with other parents and saying, "How are you doing what you're doing?" You're not alone.
Doyle, if you can speak to this one, how can I get my child to value my opinion as a parent over that of their peers, which tends to be more negative than positive?
How do they value their parents' opinion over their peers? Can't happen. I'm kidding. I think it goes back to having your child being able to believe that you care about them. So when I talk about building healthy relationships, of all the billions of people in the universe, when you first meet somebody, they become an acquaintance. And sometimes when you meet somebody who is an acquaintance, they stay on the acquaintance level, because I don't need to know anything more about you. You are just fine out there on the acquaintance level. But other times, it's a feeling like, wait a minute, I think you could be comfortable. I'm going to open the gate a little bit, and I'll let you become a casual friend. We'll hang out together with friends. You won't be making much of an impact on my life, but I'll let you be a casual friend with me. You're the keeper of the gate. The third, when it goes from acquaintance to casual and then close. Understanding that close relationships, we have many close relationships in a lifetime. Some of them, and they come and make a huge impact for a given period of time and may not be there for a lifetime. Who did you play with on the playground? Who did you sit with at the lunch table? Who did you play with after school when you got home? Those people made an impact, but you have no idea, many of them, where they are today. And so you have close friends. And then we get into the intimate. Acquaintance, casual, close, and intimate. Now, intimate, I've seen it where it goes too fast. Acquaintance, casual, close, and intimate, way too fast. Where I've seen it go intimate within one night. And almost always if it goes too fast, someone's going to get hurt. Intimate doesn't always mean physical or sexual. Intimate means I feel completely safe with you, and I can open up to you, and I can share anything with you, knowing that you will accept me and you will not reject me. I think it's very important that you know who the top 3 people are in your children's lives. Who are those top 3 people? Have you invited them to your home? Have you had dinner with them? Have you got to ask questions like, what's your favorite movie? What music do you like to listen to? Who's the hero in your life? What's the best vacation that you've ever been on? You need to know the kids that your kids are spending time with. And then when it comes to getting to know those kids, the parent card plays in that as well. Hopefully during those latency ages, you're helping them know there's going to be times that I may pull the parent card. And if I pull the parent card, it's because I have a gut feeling that I don't think you're safe with this person. When they can determine the people in their life, and you too, who's in my acquaintance, who's in my casual, who's in my close, and who's in my intimate. Many adolescents will say that they have hundreds of people in their intimate. Just look at their status on social media. And the reality is, I will tell them at this point in my life, I really only have 2, maybe 3 intimate people in my life that I can trust with anything. And child, daughter, son of mine, I'm hoping that I can be in the close and intimate circles of your life. And those people that you're going to that are giving you advice, I think they care about you, they don't have the life experience. And my goal as a parent is to get you across that adolescent bridge and launch you into adulthood with all the tools, because your children probably are genetic treasure chests. You know, our kids are smart. Our kids are they're attractive, and they have friends. They have the charisma. The goal is this genetic treasure chest that they have to get all those treasures across the bridge so that they have them when they get into their adult life. And so many choices that they can make. Play the tape out. They want to go to a party on Friday night. Everybody's going to be there. Any adults? No. Red flag. And so being able to let them know, I do want to be in your inner circle. I do want to be a part of your life. But I need to let you know that I will always be looking out for your best interest. And when they don't understand or they don't appreciate and they feel angry at you, that's okay. It's okay. Sometimes the tantrums can be unbearable, but eventually they stop. Thank you.
I think, too, one of the things that we see with our students is the importance of other safe adults in that as well. Like knowing that our students have someone besides mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or caretaker, whoever it might be, that they can go to talk about some of the things that they're going through for sure. And we'll come back to some other preventative factors as we wrap up here in just a little bit. But would anyone else like to touch on what Doyle just talked about? All right. Sienna, maybe you can help us on this one. What are some signs to look for when it comes to anxiety or depression and ways to help my child cope with issues like these?
See, this is always going to be a hard question because all your students are different. They're all going to respond differently. One that we always look for is like sudden change in interests or like no interest at all. If your kid's always been really good at math and science and always excelling in sports or club or whatever they do, and all of a sudden they draw back, that should be a red flag. And yeah, your interests are allowed to change, but it shouldn't be all of a sudden. It should come with like, hey, Mom, this is really not like making me feel happy anymore. I'm gonna try and stick it out through this season, but I don't know if I wanna do this next year. Those kinds of things. It should not be like they stop showing up for practice, they're skipping class, they're not turning their homework in, you don't even know if they bring a backpack to school anymore. It's very much like all of a sudden they just stop. That should be a red flag. I do have a couple just like written down. It's like that grade slipping. Maybe their friends change, right? All of a sudden, maybe a bunch of their friends decide not to be their friends, because that's what we always hear at home, right? They're like, they all left me. That's all you get, right? Maybe they pulled back. Maybe they are telling themselves that they're not worth where their friends are at, right? And so they pull back. Maybe they get involved with friends that you don't really know, and they don't want you to know. They're like, I'm going to go over there. I don't want them to come over here, right? That should be a red flag. Your kid should feel like they can bring their friends over. Because if they're not, it means either they're scared of what they're going to say in front of you, or what you're going to say in front of them, right? One that is like final, like this is something that needs to happen right now, you need to get them help, is like giving away possessions or finalizing plans, or they're like, oh, I just wrote this letter for you, or this like, hey, I really want you to have this for whatever reason, right? That is something that is almost always they're heading out the door, right? Another one is if they've been constantly sad for months and months and months and all of a sudden they're fine, that's not how recovery works either. That's making peace with their decision. Those are warning signs. They're crying out for help even if they don't know how to talk about it. If they're like, yeah, I just didn't really want to be there, or I just don't get it, or it's not worth trying. The other one is if they're constantly being like, I'm just tired of going. I'm tired of going to school. I'm tired of trying with my friends. You need to ask. That's the biggest thing. Just talk to your kid. Just be like, I really love you. I really love you. And be like, is there anything I'm doing that's hurting this situation? And they might say something, and you need to not be defensive about it. Because if you ask, your kid's going to tell you. Be like, yeah, it really invalidates my feelings when you think it's just a phase, or you tell me to get over it, or you didn't have this problem in high school, or high school's not that hard. This is the biggest emotion they've ever felt, and it feels like it's swallowing them. It's not the biggest emotion they'll ever feel, but right now they don't know how to go through this, and so they need that help. Coping is a different monster because every kid's different. One of them's gonna wanna listen to music, one of them's gonna wanna journal, one of them's like, I really need to go out and meet people in a new place. Maybe I need to go study in a coffee shop, right? But don't force them into any of them. Do it with them. If you want to journal, maybe you find a new journaling prompt, or you buy new journals for each other, or you're listening for music, or you're looking for meditations, or those kinds of things. I think it's incredibly important that they know that somebody's there. I'm going to pull out my phone. I actually asked on social media last night 3 questions to just students because I wanted real answers. My first one was, why don't you talk about mental health with your parents? And I got quite a few answers, and I won't read them all. It's like, I think that if I talk to my parents, they're going to belittle me or say that it's fake. Specific to my family, but I don't talk about my mental health because he sees it as weakness. They don't believe mental health is a real thing. They think Gen Z made it up for attention. It's never openly been talked about. The second one was, if I can open it, especially when you're struggling, what would have been helpful to hear from your parents? Everything is going to be okay, even if it's not right now. That it's valid and not me just worrying or being lazy when I'm depressed and I can't get up. That it's okay to feel it. It may not feel like it's allowed to be felt, but your feelings are valid. That they're there and they'll support me. Having them be calm and not immediately freak out and try to understand what I was dealing with. Sometimes you're just not going to get it, right? And the last one is, what's an unhelpful thing people say when you bring up mental health, and they're like, that sucks, but, and then proceeds to say a problem about their own. When people use toxic positivity in a response to opening up, it's like, oh, but you'll get over that. You're going to grow out of that. It's going to be just fine. Sometimes your kid wants to hear that it sucks. Be like, I can't imagine. I didn't go through that in high school. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Let me hear your story. I want to open that door even if you don't get it. Try to. Your kids just want to be understood.
So good. Thank you so much. Anybody else?
So you're invaluable to this panel. She really is. I think when you're talking to your kids, somehow you might feel like you have to fix it for them or provide an answer. I think all they want is validation. It's like if you said that to me, I'd say, it sounds like you're really hurting. You just want to be validated. It's pretty easy. You just have to do reflective listening. So they say, I don't know, this is really hard to tell you, Mom. And I'd say, sounds like it is really hard. I'm listening. So it's a lot easier. There's a book that I like that I give when I'm parent coaching. It's called How to Talk to Teens So Your Teens Will Listen, and How to Listen So Your Teens Will Talk. But it's great. It's reflective listening. So they come home and maybe they're like, I've had a really bad day. And you're like, you've had a bad day? That's all you have to say. You don't have to figure it out for them. They just want to be heard. And then it helps them say more.
That's good.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing. That's brilliant what these guys are sharing. And I would say, listen, and you'll know when it's time to jump in and fix it, right? They'll probably ask for advice or they'll kind of give you a cue, but a lot of time they just want to hear.
I'm going to add a little bit more. One thing that we have a problem with doing is being like, I don't remember high school being this hard, right? It's like, well, I have bills and I have to keep the kids fed and I have to do this and this and this. And that's not the kid's responsibility, so they don't know this world yet, right? And I talk about this with them. I'm like, your parents are doing this because they see high school as you see the first time you got pushed over on a playground. It's like the end of the world. It's like the end of the world. You're like, everybody hates me. My teacher didn't check up on me later. It's the world ending. And I'm like, no, you grew out of that. You're okay now, right? Your parents are seeing this the same way. But these kids literally just want you to be like, it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. Because if we invalidate it and we're like, life gets so much worse. You know what they hear? They're like, if I'm already struggling, what's next, right? Like, don't be like, oh, you don't even know what life is like, because that's not what they need. They're like, hey, I'm really struggling. And a lot of adults look at them and like, it gets worse. Like, I don't know. That was just something I wanted to add.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Learning to listen to understand rather than listening to respond. When they're coming to you, when they finally have the courage to come and talk to you, that you're listening to understand. Where's the root problem? And because too often I've been guilty of, before they're even halfway through, I already have my response for them. And I need to listen to understand. And when they feel like they're being heard and validated, then they realize, oh, I do matter to you. Thank you.
Yeah. DJ, how can I, as a teacher, help my students who have just given up and no longer have the drive to do anything? It is evident that their grades are slipping because of their mental health.
Yeah, this one definitely hit home for me. I've seen a lot of teachers deal with this. I feel like I dealt with this a little bit in grad school. I'm sure as parents, you see at home this as well. In my experience, what I've seen is most of the time they haven't given up, they've just given in to a lie, right? So we have to be able to find out what that lie is, break the chain, and pump them full of truth, right? Replace that. You are good enough. You are worthy. You are beautiful. You can do it, right? I'm going to start preaching, Tommy.
Come on.
Give me a mic, man. Come on. But that's what we need to do. We got to break that chain of lies. And wherever that is, we have to find it. I wrote down a few things that at home you can do to help troubleshoot, to find where that lie is. One of those things is, what are the expectations, right? If a teacher submitted this, I would say, in the classroom, what are your expectations of this child? Is it too much? Is it too little? Ask them. You don't know what's going on in their little mind. It might be too much. They may feel like, I have 4 hours of homework every single night, and that's why I've given up. Or every time I really, really try hard and study for a test like you tell me to, I get a D, and no one says anything to me. As a parent, are you expecting too much? Guys, not everybody can get all A's, right? How can you expect all kids to get all A's? It just doesn't make sense. Curriculum, it doesn't make sense. So, expect them to try hard and do their best. Don't say, if you get straight A's, all this. That breaks a kid down. I hear it all the time. They feel all this pressure from their parents to get straight A's. And even though you may be, reinforcing it with a positive benefit, if you get all straight A's, you can get this new game, or you can do whatever. Like, that's all good. I'm definitely a fan of that. But be careful how you're presenting that to your kids, right? They may feel like the prize is secondary to your respect, right? And so you really need to be careful how you're presenting that, what your expectations are for your kids, and then ask them what are their expectations of themselves, right? This always comes back to social media, you know. What are other kids saying? And what they're seeing on social media is how they're expecting themselves to be or perform. You know, I need to have a boyfriend. I need to have a girlfriend. I expect these things out of myself. I need to make the baseball team, or I need to have the lead in the theater. I need to have these things. These are my expectations of myself. And we know that's just not realistic, right? It's not always possible. Not all 15 kids can be lead. So are they expecting that out of themselves? And you need to find that, you know, sit down, talk to them, help them understand, like Doyle was saying. And once you find that lie that they're telling themselves that they've given into, break it and replace it with the truth. And I think that's definitely something you can do. Another thing is providing some perspective, right? Yeah. Michael Jordan didn't make his high school team until his junior year, right? You know, are we looking at school as an opportunity to learn or just like a chore, you know? On the flip side, are we looking at parenting as a chore sometimes? You know? So we kind of have to ask those intrinsic questions in ourselves and kind of see, you know, maybe I'm falling victim to a lie too. How can I help provide some perspective to my kid? One thing that I like a lot is go volunteer. I've never regretted volunteering, ever. I went to the food bank 3 weeks ago, and walking in, I was thinking, I do not have time for this. And how am I going to recover after I'm here for 4 hours and I'm not getting any work done? And I walked out of there so thankful and with a brand new perspective. And I've been holding on to that for the last 3 weeks. And so it's a long-lasting thing. Once we break out of this kind of like every day kind of it's a chore going to school, break that, go volunteer. Plum Creek has a lot of fantastic opportunities to volunteer. It's easy to get involved in that stuff. Go at least once a month. Go every other month. But if you're finding that maybe there's some stuff going on or they're seeing irritable or they feel like they've given up or given into some of these things, go volunteer. Go do something, getting out of themselves and not expecting anything in return. I think that's always a great thing to do. It's never a bad thing. And then the last thing is help them find a passion, you know. Do they like to climb mountains? Go climb some mountains, you know. Do they want to learn guitar? Help them learn guitar, and that's an ancillary thing they can do on top of school, right? That's not their whole identity. And also, learning and being productive and pouring yourself into an instrument, you know, that's something in itself. Do karate, right? Find something that they can help them find their passion, and they can do that, and you'll see how that will permeate into other parts of their life, right?
DJ, you kind of hit on there, like from the parents' perspective and making sure that like they're starting with their own mental health at times, coming from the right place. And we had a question come in that said, how can I recognize when my personal trauma, triggers, insecurities, and experiences are interfering with my ability to parent well? And how can I improve that when I myself am still a person in process?
Great question. I think the first step in that is just being aware that those things are there, right? I know they're there for me, they're there for everybody, and we're naive to think that we're not carrying some level of trauma into these, you know, into raising kids. It's hard, and so I would say be aware of what that is, and if you find that it's continuing to, you know, maybe you snap a little bit more than you should have, and you're kind of reflecting on that. Feel free to get some professional help on your own. You know, get some tools to be able to work on that stuff. It's hard, and I feel like giving yourself some grace too is really, really important as a parent. It's like, you know, you're gonna fail. You know, it's a fact. Like, we're broken. You're gonna fail your kids sometimes. You're gonna fail your husband and wife sometimes. I think admitting that, accepting that, and being aware of where those soft spots are in your parenting toolkit, and then working on those, leveraging the good things, working on some things that you need to work on, I think is the biggest thing you can do.
Anybody else?
Again, it goes back to that modeling thing. I remember when my dad was struggling with mental health when I was a teenager. and he would tell me a little bit about it. It made me feel like I could see him as a person instead of just my dad. And his mental health struggles didn't make mine any worse. It actually helped me as a teen, again, that modeling, like, okay, he's talking about it. It helped put things in perspective for me. So when he'd come home and he'd be angry and he'd slam cupboards, I didn't think it was my fault. I knew, okay, dad's had a bad day, he's struggling right now. It made me respect him more. So it goes back to that modeling. I think if you are struggling with your own season, it's okay to let them know as much as you feel is appropriate for their age. And when my dad passed away, I remember I was a little bit short with my kids. And I would just tell them, I'm sorry, I'm not listening as well as I should. It's been hard for me today. And then they could step back and say, I understand, okay. So I think giving yourself permission to be open.
That's good. Catherine, this one says, my child doesn't have many friends, but I can't seem to get them to participate in any social events. And even when they do, they have trouble making new friends. How can I get them to step outside of their comfort zone when it comes to making friends?
This is a great question. There's so many ways to look at it. Number one, as somebody I've been in ministry forever too, elementary and the middle, the first question is, what expectations do you have for your child? Is it the same ones you have for yourself? That you think they should be having this great friend group? I remember the light went on for me one day when I saw this kid eating alone, and I always go up to those kids that are eating by themselves. After I had a conversation with that child, I realized he wanted to sit by himself. He needed a little break from everybody. Not everybody is the same, and that's okay. So I think you need to kind of figure out what their social needs are. Maybe they have one friend and they're completely fine with that one friend. So we need to look at our expectation versus their own personality, see them as a unique individual. The other side of looking at this is, what are you modeling? Are you expecting to have your kid to have circles of friends and things like that, but you never have friends over, or you never make time for friends? So that's another way to look at it. And how are you modeling? Sometimes that kid doesn't know how to have friends. Maybe you have people over to your house. Maybe you have like a neighborhood gathering or something so that you can model to your child how to talk to people and how to make friends. I think I've seen parents try to push their kids so many times, like, you got to do something. You got to try this. You got to try that. And sometimes it'll just happen naturally and you have to be patient. But I think, again, having those conversations like, well, if you were to do something, what would that look like? And here's another mistake I think I see a lot of parents make, is that they push on their kids what they enjoy, not what the kids enjoy. So it's really important if you're spending some time with your kid, which I think everybody should spend that intentional one-on-one time with your kid, even if you have 5 kids. Pick one and rotate them. It's, what would you like to do? Not, you're going to play hockey because I played hockey growing up, or we're going to climb a mountain because that's what I like to do. Find out what they like to do and study them. You've already got yourself figured out, so study what they want to do.
That's good. Anyone else?
Catherine, thank you on the idea of studying your child. If you've grown up in the church and you're a parent, probably you've heard the verse that says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. And I like what was taught to me, that as far as train up a child in the way that they should go, what are their interests? What are their passions? What is their bent? And so when I, finding out that I had one child that wanted to be a teacher and an author. I had another child that wanted to, just loved entertainment. And so to be able to say, okay, you're the same age as Macaulay Culkin and you want to be him? No, I just love entertaining. And how do we have that grow? Being a student of your child. I'm a big fan. If I say Enneagram, how many of you know what I'm talking about? Great. If you don't know about the Enneagram, I'm going to encourage you to get the book by Ian Crone, The Road Back to You. It will give you the Enneagram and the 9 personalities. When you've gone through the 9 personalities and you can identify yours, maybe your spouse, and go through your children, I can tell you that I'm a 4, my wife is a 9, my daughter's a 2, my son is a 7, my grandson is a 7, my other grandson is a 9. And so that means nothing to you if you don't know about the Enneagram. But when you understand how they are wired and how they look at life, because I'm a 4, there's a healthy 4 and there's an unhealthy 4. And so to know your child, and to have, as far as having 3 types of people in my life and your life, I need to have a mentor in my life. Your child needs a mentor in their life. I'm so grateful for Tommy and his staff and the mentors that you are to the people of your community. They need to have mentors. They need to have healthy relationships of that they do life with, that they get dirty with, they make goals with, and they plan things out. And hopefully you know who those people are. And the third type of person, which goes back to what DJ was saying, is they need to have somebody who's younger or less fortunate or less experienced than them that they can pour into. And by having those 3 types of people, first of all, in my life, in your child's life, will help them understand that they need to be taking in, they need to be doing the work, and they need to be giving out.
That's good. Yeah.
One more thing I forgot to say about how to help your kid participate in social events. Somebody said volunteering. That's a great thing to do, like as a family, or your child can volunteer because they feel valued and purposeful. It's easier to make friends when you're feeling confident about yourself. So volunteering is great.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. You know, there's a lot of momentum in building friendships and feeling confident about yourself. And so if they don't, you know, there may be a reason why they don't want to do the things that the social groups that maybe you've come up with. Find what they're good at. You know your kid better than anybody else. Find what they're good at. If they're really good at art or drawing, stick them in a drawing club. In 2 weeks, I bet you they're going to love the drawing club because they're good at it. They're going to get a lot of positive reinforcement. They're going to like going. They're going to make friends really easily, like Catherine said. And then they can parlay that into maybe then youth group or parlay that maybe into then soccer because they've realized, like, it's not as scary as I thought it was.
That's good. Well, we're about out of time, so we're going to come to our last couple of questions here. Sienna, help us out. What guidance can I give my child when they openly say they no longer want to live?
I really hope none of you ever hear this because this is such a hard conversation to have. The first one I would probably ask is ask if they have a plan. Ask if they have a plan or they're, you know, they have ideas of how, because that really gives you how close they are and it means how immediate, like, help needs to be. Another one is just like asking if you can like sleep in the living room together. Be like, I'm really glad you're here, and I would feel better if we were able to hang out. Maybe they don't want to sleep. Maybe you stay up all night, and I know you have work tomorrow, but you stay up all night and you watch a movie or you watch their favorite TV series all night with them, but that means that you were willing to take out the time for them. You were willing to sit there in the mud, in the darkness with them. You're not just sitting from the outside being like, come on, it's okay. Because that right now, all they see is darkness, right? And just never stop talking to them. I think that's the best way. Like, talk to them about what's going on with you. Talk to them about what's going on in school. And don't, parents have this way of talking to them at the worst times. Like, maybe they don't want to bring it up at dinner because everybody's sitting there. If you can get them to, like, maybe they do like painting. If you start painting with them and you're like, so how's school? And then stop talking. Just shut your mouth. They will start talking. It will start coming out of them because they're like a soda bottle. And if you shake it and you shake it and you shake it, they're going to let stuff out, right? And you don't want this huge explosion of emotion because that's when fights happen. You want them to have this little like, oh, you know, like me and Jessica just really aren't getting along. And you're like, oh, why is that? You know, like that little bit of just let's have a conversation about what's going on. that no longer to live part is very, very scary. My parents navigated this with my sister. My sister was severely mentally ill through high school. And my parents really didn't know what to do. It was kind of just like, pray for her. But my sister luckily found like help in a youth group and in my brother, and being able to sit down and have somebody be like, I don't know what you're going through. I really don't, but I want to. I want to get here. I want to understand what's going on. And just remember, this isn't failure of your parenting. Them struggling with their mental health is not a failure of your parenting. You can try your best and still miss things, right? And them being able to open up about those things means you're succeeding. If they're coming to you and they're like, hey, I don't want to live anymore, that means you're doing well, because they were able to bring that up and be like, I don't know what to do with myself, right? And I have a couple resources that will be out that you can get mental health first aid trained. And we're going to be putting a group together for that. But I also have something called Robbie's Hope Handbook, and it's pretty much how to talk to your student when they're going through something like this. And I've got a bunch of copies out there that if any of you need those.
That's great. Remember, as we were going through the youth mental health first aid training, one of the, I think, hardest parts of the training is we came to this of like, hey, if you think that a student or a friend or whoever is at risk, to just outright ask them, are you thinking about ending your life? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Since that training, I've asked that question 6 times. And I think we have this thought that like, oh, I'm going to plant the thought in their brain, which is not the case at all. 3 of the times it's like, no, I'm not there. I'm just venting. I'm going through whatever. And 3 of the times it was, yes, I am. And then to ask some of the follow-up questions that Sienna talked about, and able to, in all 3 of these situations, get help that they may have never gotten had we not been willing to just outright ask a very, very tough question. I think it's worth also asking of the follow-up too of, as a parent, someone in a student's life, how do we know when they're just talking, and when do we need to make sure that we're taking it seriously when they say something to these lines? Doyle, would you mind touching on that?
When are they bluffing? When are they throwing the trump card as far as, I don't want to do my homework, you have to do your homework. Well, I'm just going to kill myself. It's those trump cards that they throw out there, we always err on the side of safety. So if they're throwing that line out there, to be able to say, talk to me about what you mean by that. Being able to, and by the way, if you are at this moment and you're thinking, I don't know what to do, there's help in our community. If you need to, you can go to Denver Springs, which is a mental health facility. They have an adolescent unit, and they will do a free mental health assessment. I'm not sure if they're serious or not. Well, if you're taking them there and they're not serious, it's going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that again. But also being able to get the help that they need. And as a parent, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I think it was probably 2 or 3 years ago. Netflix put out a series called 13 Reasons Why. How many of you know of that series? How many of you saw the series? How many of you saw it with your children? When that series came out, I was late to the party. Every adolescent who was coming in to see me was telling me about 13 Reasons Why. And it's a story of a young girl in high school, and she takes her life. And then she gives the 13 people who were responsible for her decision of taking her life, she leaves a tape for them. And so it was a lot, very, 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 very controversial. And then I said, let's use this as a tool that parents, no child, I don't think should ever watch that by themselves. But parents, sit down with your child, Maybe not watch all 13 sessions, it's very heavy. But have your remote handy and pause it for a moment saying, what just happened there? Because the same characters that are in that show are the same characters that were in your high school. The bully, the jock, the outsider, the one trying to fit in. And to be able to stop and say, oh, that person's name in the movie is this. In my high school, his name was this. Who do you associate with? And to be able to pause it and say, how are you doing? That's heavy. But all of this is heavy. And so it's always the, what if? We as parents are doing the best we can do with the information we have at the time. And the fact you're sitting in this room today tells me that you want to be a better parent. And I'm grateful to be a part of this panel and the roles that we play in our children's lives and the positive impact we can make. And sometimes we just feel like, I don't know. Yeah, been there. We all feel that way at times. And that's why we seek each other out. Thank you.
Good.
I have another thing to add if you're concerned about your child, if they're saying, that they're thinking about ending their life and you're not sure what to do and it's not imminent, like they don't have a plan, is if your kid is in school, you can call their school counselor. We're very trained to do assessments. So that's another thing that you can get the school involved and then maybe let somebody at school know that they are struggling so that you can have eyes on them too. So yeah, there's the community health and then use the supports that are already there. And yeah, take them seriously every time. And again, this is under construction for young ladies until they're about 18 and young men until they're about 21. So just remember that's part of the equation too.
Good.
I think one of the biggest ones is ask them. Like, ask what you can do for them. What would be good for you right now? And the other thing is, and I'm a big believer of this, is telling them every day that they're needed, loved, and valued. Because this is what we talk about in classes, and I can tell you that your students, we talk about it. Do you know that you're needed versus do you feel needed? Do you know that you're loved versus do you feel loved? Do you know what your kids' love language is? The 5 love languages? Do they know yours? Because they may not be recognizing that you making sure their car is filled up before they go out for the weekend is an act of love. Maybe they really want a hug from you. Maybe they want to hear that you're proud of them, right? You should be trying to speak the same love language as your kid. Because then, yeah, if I ask your kid, do you know your parents love you? They'd be like, yeah, Sienna. Yeah, I know. But do you feel it? Do you get it? Do you understand it, right? So I think asking, what can I do for you? And telling them every day. Don't let them forget it. You're needed, loved, and valued. You're really important to everybody around you.
That's great. All right, as we wrap up, panelists, really quickly, what are some of the other preventative measures that we can take to make sure that we are setting our students up for success as much as possible and just minimizing the risks for our students?
Communication. There's 4 styles of communication that I talk about. The passive. I don't care, do whatever you want, it doesn't matter to me. Aggressive. Whoever yells the loudest wins, my way or the highway. Passive aggressive. I'm not going to tell you what the problem is. You have to figure out what the problem is. And then when you figure out what the problem is, you're probably going to be wrong, and I get to be mad at you twice. Passive, aggressive, passive aggressive, and the healthy one is assertive. We need to talk. That communication. And by the way, I am really good at passive. I'm very good at aggressive, but I have a master's degree in passive aggressive. I can hold a grudge and I can be moody and you just have to just walk around me and I'm happy to let you do it. And I've recognized that if I don't have my act together and if I don't know how to communicate in a healthy, assertive way, because when they hurt your feelings and then you go into passive, Or you go into aggressive, into a rage. Or you go into the passive aggressive of, I just won't talk to you. What just be able to say to them in an assertive way, what's going on right now is not okay. We probably will not talk about this right now, but we're going to come back to it because I don't want to say something that's going to make this worse. But being able to keep that communication line open and being able to say, we need to talk. I love you too much. When I mentioned 13 Reasons Why, the thing that I found in that was the parents were completely disconnected. I'm hoping that as you're sitting here in this parent workshop, that means you are not disconnected. You don't want to be disconnected. And as best as you can, you're going to model for them how, there were issues, when I talk about my unresolved issues from childhood, I have them. Do you? And to be able to talk with your kids about, man, I remember when I was in high school back before whatever, this is what I struggled with. So let them know that there are things that you understand and you have battled through and you survived. Thank you.
Yeah. Catherine.
I want to tag on to that communication piece. It's important to be intentional about the communication. So your kid, you got to set some time aside to talk to your kid. Whether that's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on their age. So you need a time and a place. So I'm going to use my son as an example. We used to sit out on the front porch and drink hot tea. So we had a space. It was a safe space. It wasn't his room or my room or in front of everybody. So if he had something big to talk, we had a time and a space. And he'd say, Mom, can we go have some tea on the front porch? I knew we needed to talk about. Sometimes it was nothing because he wanted to connect, and sometimes it was something big. So just remember that in your head, a time and a space for your kids to communicate.
That's good. Sienna?
I think the biggest thing is always telling them that no matter what, you're going to love them. And you have to really ring true to that. If they made a mistake and they know they made a mistake, you don't need to tell them that they made a mistake. Just be like, hey, I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you got home safe. I know it's 30 minutes past curfew. I know it's 4 hours past curfew, but I'm really glad that you got home safe. That I love you, and then we'll deal with this. If they're coming home from an emotional day and they're like, I don't want to talk, and you're like, all right, I love you. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Can we do this? Keep asking questions that support. If your kid's worried that you're going to blow up on them about one thing, they will not talk to you about anything. I promise you. Because if you've blown up on them when they brought up their friend struggling, or if you've made it about your high school life or this or that, they're not going to want to talk about it because they don't know how the next step goes. They're going to hide things. If they're late, they're going to make up excuses instead of being like, I forgot I was supposed to be home at this time. They're going to be like, well, the car broke down, and then I had to go over here, or I left my keys at their house, because they're scared of what's going to happen. That, I love you. Tell me when you made a mistake. I make mistakes. How many of us leave our keys at the house? Or leave our phone at the house and have to turn around? It's okay. So just keep asking. Tell them you love them. That's what they need to hear.
That's good. DJ.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two biggest things provide structure and build resiliency. Kids crave structure so badly, and we have to give that to them. And so if that means, if you don't have a set of expectations and consequences at home that they are signed off on and aware of, you need to tonight. And it doesn't have to be micromanaging, but it has to be very clear, and they need to know what the consequences are if they don't follow up with that. So for example, you can't say, you got to mow the lawn. When? How? I expect you to mow the lawn sometime before 5 o'clock on Sunday, and it needs to be completed this way. This is what I expect. Very clear. And if they don't reach those expectations, there's a consequence that they already have signed off on that they understand, that you will then deliver. And it doesn't have to be this sit down, oh my gosh, can you believe I'm talking to you about this again, and this big deal, because you've already taken care of that on the front end, right? And so, finding out what that is in your home and coming up with clear expectations and then clear consequences for that stuff is critical. And they may kick and scream about it, but they need it. And once they kind of are on the same page with that, you'll kind of find that they fall into a routine and a rhythm with all that stuff. So if you say you expect them home by 9 and it's 9:01, there's a consequence. It doesn't have to be this yelling, screaming thing. We've already decided what it's going to be. So here's a consequence. You lose your phone for 2 days. Try better next time. It's already been taken care of. The other thing is build that resiliency. And Catherine and I were talking about this before we hopped on stage. And, kids are so resilient. But it's also, it's really important to build that resiliency. And so if they come home and they've had a bad day at school and maybe they cry and it doesn't check those 3 measures, it's just kind of a bad day, and they don't want to go to school the next day, say, okay, I'm here to talk to you and provide wisdom and be here for you, just like these guys are saying, but you're going to go to school, and that's my decision. I'm being assertive. And it's not a choice, we can talk about it, but you're going to school tomorrow. And they'll fall in line and they'll go and they'll come home and they'll be like, yeah, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And so that kind of helps them build that resiliency. If they broke up with their boyfriend at youth group and they're really weird about going back now, it's like, okay, I hear you. It's weird. It's going to be awkward, but you're going. You're going to go, and it's going to be okay too. And they're going to go, and it will be okay. And so I feel like as parents, understanding, okay, I need to put them in a place where they can learn and have some real-life experiences and build on this and create their own resiliency. Because when they leave, 18, 19, 20, whenever, they're going to have those moments, and they're going to have to face them. And so you as parents have done your job by, creating and cultivating this environment for them to go through some of these struggles that aren't as big yet, but they're going to go through them and they're going to get through them. And you're going to be right there when they come home to talk about it. But they went there and you followed up on your promise too.
It's good. We are over our time, so we want to honor yours for sure. But can we thank our panelists really quickly? So helpful. Thank you all. And actually, I'm going to invite our panelists to go ahead and head on out to the atrium. That way you are in place before we dismiss our folks here. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to come and to just help to find ways that we can love and serve and set our students up for success, for sure. We just want to let you know that this has been recorded today and it will be made available. And so thank you so much. If you're interested in that, we will be getting it to you if you register, and you can share that as well. If you're interested in meeting one of our panelists, as we said, they're heading outside right now. They've got some resources out there that they would love to point you toward. This is not going to be an opportunity to dive really, really deeply into a very specific situation with your kid, but they would love to point you in the right direction on a few things as well. On behalf of Plum Creek Church, thank you so much for being here. Again, remember for all of us that we are all people in process, and that means, again, that we need to adopt a growth mindset, that we are not fixed, and that we need to take this journey ourselves, and as we guide our students through it as well. We thank you for your time, and we hope to see you at some point in the future for sure. Hope you have a great weekend.